Yesterday's worship at White Rock United Methodist Church.
We talk about what caught our attention, stories we forgot to tell, and ways that we saw the Holy Spirit moving among us. Good morning, friends.
Now we're live.
Take 7.
Y'all, let me just go ahead and say it. It's a Monday.
So, yes. Hi, everybody, for our droves of fans who just set their clocks by our 9 a.m. podcast.
My phone was blowing up.
Mine too, right?
Where are y'all? Where are y'all?
So thank you all for joining us, whether you are joining us live right now or coming back to this on our podcast channel later. If you missed worship yesterday, we started our Advent series, Joy in the Darkness. You can find that on Facebook and YouTube in entirety. And then you can also later this week find different portions of our worship. So the Sunday sit down, Mitchell's sermon on this podcast channel as well. All thanks to Phil. So, and Dexter. So thank you both for your editing help. But yeah, so it was Advent 1, and we were just talking about like it's always some years it's a little bit of a rushed transition from Thanksgiving to Advent because it in a way feels like two very different seasons that are crammed together. You know what I mean?
For sure. You still have Thanksgiving leftovers, right?
Right.
And you have to kind of shift gears quickly and begin preparing yourself for Christmas. And Advent 1's always sneaky. And I think people are traveling normally during this time, and so I think historically it's been just a kind of whiplash when you get done with Thanksgiving and you're right in the midst of the church's New Year. And so this year I think it's a little different.
Would you say it's a sneaky good Sunday?
Sneaky good Sunday.
I would say, yeah, totally. Any Sunday it's a sneaky good Sunday. I think people are more prepared though for it this year. At least, like in our house, we went ahead and broke all the cardinal rules, and we put our Christmas lights up early. We put our Christmas tree up early, and we're kind of anxious to get to Christmas. I think, right?
This is totally off the rails here, but I'm a little worried that everyone's so anxious to get to Christmas that it's going to be such a letdown because we're going to be in the exact same place. But maybe Christmas will carry us. I don't know. I'm feeling let down by Thanksgiving maybe a little bit. So that's where I am.
Yeah,
I'm anxious for everyone who's been like, oh, Christmas has got to get here. And I'm like, I hear you, but also we're going to be sitting in the exact same seat.
Yeah, that's true.
Sorry for that heavy downer.
Well, I was going to say a little bit of a sidebar too. Mitchell, you said we still have Thanksgiving leftovers. So Thanksgiving story real quick. I know this is not the point of the podcast. We have a ton of leftovers that we were not expecting to have because we had a ham that we got from Jeff's work that was supposed to be just already cooked, already smoked. Well, all we had to do was reheat it in the oven for 45 minutes. This was not the case. And it ended up being needed to be cooked for 4 hours. And so we just actually gave up and just had sides and pie for Thanksgiving.
Y'all were hamless on Thanksgiving?
And we had 2 vegetarians. So my stepdaughter and my sister-in-law are both vegetarians. So they were just like, hey, we'll take the company. We're glad that you're keeping us company. But so we ate at 4 p.m. Ham was ready at 8 p.m. So that was fun. Everybody was too full to have any. So we have ham for days.
I love a good ham.
It was just nobody cared, but it was just one of those things. It's this would happen.
Eli loves ham too.
I know. We've talked about that.
Extra leftover ham.
I froze an entire bag. If y'all really do want that, I can bring over a block of ham for you to thaw out.
A block of ham. Or if you have a wound that needs tending, you can just put your block of ham on it.
Totally.
I feel like you have to have turkey on Thanksgiving.
Turkey's overrated.
I agree.
It normally is unless you cook it right. Right?
So I know you're a big smoke it?
Smoked turkey's awesome.
But
oven-baked turkey's garbage.
Don't you hold a very controversial position, Mitchell? Everybody's going dry brine and you're still on the wet brine train?
Brine guy. Yeah, totally. anyway, we'll have Brian talk some. Maybe like, didn't we do last year? Didn't we do like just
we did a Thanksgiving
talk?
podcast.
Yeah,
Yes, we did.
totally. So,
And
maybe we'll
Josh
film that.
brought up the perennial question of why the Thanksgiving Day parade, which actually would be really interesting this year because the Thanksgiving Day parade looked so odd.
It looked odd, but they did some good moves there.
Yeah,
right?
they did. They did. So yeah, we
That's
had a
good
request in the comments. More ham talk.
Good tributes.
Yeah. So yes, Thanksgiving's still in our fridge, and yet we're moving really quickly into Advent because Advent has started, and we're preparing right now for Advent too,
right?
Which is just hard to wrap. Well, it's hard for me to wrap my head around. So here we go, and our theme this year, I think, is I'm really excited about it because I think it's really something that we're all desperate for, is finding joy in the midst of darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought the call to worship yesterday, Rebecca did a fantastic job of setting the scene, not only for Advent 1, but for all of Advent as we kind of move towards Bethlehem. So tell us where you found it, how you wrote it, how you compiled it.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, this whole series, Joy in the Darkness, I've been contemplating for a long time. Those of you who know me know I start ideating about Advent pretty much right after Easter. And this year, I really felt drawn to this concept of we are not trying to defeat darkness. Darkness is not bad, not evil. Really basing a lot of that off of Barbara Brown Taylor's book, Learning to Walk in the Dark. And in there, she describes in a couple of different ways things that I think are meaningful to us this year. That on the one hand, when we say dark to mean bad, that can very unintentionally feed into this idea that people and things that are dark are also bad. And so it's a very easy jump to say dark is bad, black is bad. And that's something that she really challenges us to get away from and to expand our vocabulary, to be more aware of what we're saying, to say that darkness is not bad or evil or even undesirable. Darkness is just a part of our reality. And so this concept of joy in the darkness, the call to worship, was actually, I drew the majority of it out of a book called A Procession of Prayers. And it draws from prayers all around the world. It was compiled by John Carden. And there are prayers truly from every corner of the world, Sri Lanka, China, Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, Zimbabwe. And this one spoke to exactly what I thought we needed to start with by saying, the darkness of the womb is where we're nurtured and protected, right? And the darkness of the sky is what allowed the Magi to see the star. Right. And so just really some of these ideas that we don't normally think about. And in a year that has had so much grief and unknown and things that we might perceive as being a dark night of the soul, right? As John of the Cross would say. Mm-hmm. What does it mean not to avoid it or ignore it or paint it as bad, but really to find joy in what we can learn from it and what darkness has to nourish and teach us?
Yeah, I love the womb analogy because I think it's easy for us to forget that's where like life starts in this darkness. And after going through Eli's birth again, it really kind of hit me when I started to think about how much care and love is given to something that is unseen. And before we even get to meet Declan, right, we were very conscious of what was happening in the midst of that the darkness. And I think if we can take that kind of approach, it paired well with my use of the word midwife in my sermon, which was unintended because I didn't read the call ahead of time. But I think it's a good reminder that what does it look like for darkness to be a midwife to something, to birthing something. I think the challenge always is that that's a very lovely kind of sentiment of that was written into the call. And the challenge is also seeing the darkness that exists, like the feeling of darkness as a, the antithesis of comfort. And I wonder how we can kind of extrapolate on that over the next few weeks, because darkness is a really broad category. There's rest in darkness, but there's also fear. Like Cash is scared of the dark right now, right? There's an innate fear that I think exists. We have to like overcome it, but I think it's like it doesn't provide the feeling of safety all the time if we can't.
Sure.
So I think like that's why this series is so layered, because joy in the midst of both comfort that we find in darkness, but also joy in the midst of darkness that causes us great anxiety is also something that can still be had. And I think the challenge is how do we make sense of that over weeks?
And I think the point of Barbara Brown Taylor book, and also what I'm hoping for us to get for this is to get away from the labels, not to say light good, dark bad, but to realize that there are complexities within all of it. Because what comes to mind, Mitchell, you're exactly right. Kids and adults alike can feel afraid of the dark, but also I'm thinking of like the overly bright, cold, sterile light of a hospital makes me afraid.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, when
the lights in my office make me feel horrible. Right.
Right. Yeah. So this concept of, separating fear from the concept of light or dark and really examining fear for what it is, and likewise separating joy from the concept of light or dark and examining it for what it is.
Yeah, and I think putting joy in darkness is the thing that makes us ponder both definitions and then like our own experience, right? And because we normally don't talk about joy in the midst of darkness. We always talk about joy as the thing that comes after, right? The sun has
the light at the end of the tunnel,
right? Is beginning to rise, and then dawn's here, and now we can have joy, which is very Easter, right? So like, I think Advent gives us a very good opportunity to say like, look, like darkness is not inherently bad.
Yeah, and I think
did a great job with that.
Well, that's the point too. Well, two things. Marcus wrote a comment that I think, Phil, would you mind reading that? I mean, that's just a really good resource for people if they're just listening and not watching us.
I'm going to mispronounce the word, but I'll try. Marcus said the kids' book, Solvi, by Lupito Nyong'o, is a great connector to a different take on, quote, dark is bad, black is bad, unquote, and not only talks race, but also a bit of a creation story of dichotomy of light needing dark and vice versa.
Yeah. So I think that is part of it too. And also, just a little kind of Easter egg, our first hymn, which was O Come, O Come, Emmanuel, one of my favorite hymns, tons of verses, and we usually don't sing all of them because it gets long, and the poetry is so rich that I'd rather just choose a few at a time to focus on. And this year, one of the ones that I chose was verse 3, that talks about the great Lord of might coming to the tribes on Sinai's height, in cloud and majesty and awe. And so I think something in the Old Testament that we don't talk about a lot is this concept of God coming with the cover of cloud and with the cover of night. And so that's something that we, through dreams in clouds, that adds another layer of complexity. So yeah.
That's my favorite hymn. I think just in of all. It's just so good.
Of all?
Yeah, I think so.
It's a great one. It's very ancient. I mean, honestly, it's not a hymn, it's a chant. And the way we sing it is very metricized, but the way it was originally intended was a chant that's very free flowing, that allows the poetry to breathe more. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Also, the book pronunciation is Sulwe. Thank you, Dexter. Dexter's fact checking me here, which I am always grateful for.
Oh, goodness. Well, so yeah, I also had to say, going back to the Thanksgiving talk, Phil, I feel like we have to do a shout out to the combination that I found very bizarre of your cup of gratitude mug with your pirate Christmas sweater. That is not a sentence I ever thought I would say.
Well, I feel like we needed a good transition piece, and I feel like that transitioned us, like it was the perfect combination of all things lovely. Yeah.
I love it. Talk to us about the Sunday sit-downs that happened yesterday, but also that are coming up for the rest of Advent.
So if you missed a Sunday sit-down, yeah, we decided we would change pace a little bit because it was really heavy with Lisa Hancock, as Mitchell laughs, right? Like it was a lot, and like dealing with conflict and negotiating all that was a lot. So I thought, what would be a fun opportunity just to change pace? And I thought, well, let's chat about what we love about Christmas so much. And I loved having Dexter on because I know Dexter was on this podcast a couple weeks ago, but often Dexter's behind the scenes and nobody gets to really see or hear him very much. And so it was fun that he just flipped the camera around, or as I put a note in the comments on our actual podcast that he didn't just flip the camera around. He took a lot of time to set up that camera shot, right? Because he always makes sure that it's perfect. But no, right. It was great.
He even had like a tiny little Charlie Brown tree behind him.
Put up the tree behind him and everything.
He was like, Christmas has got to be in this frame.
And so
he says nothing less.
He's commenting in our So that's what I wanted to do though, right? Like again, like there is a lot of darkness still in the midst of where we are right now with this pandemic. And so I thought like even this, like having conversations with our staff, and again, whether that's the three of us, who people kind of see a whole lot more, or whether it's Dexter, and I'm really trying to convince Farron, and I think he might do it.
That's exciting.
I know.
So Phil, I told you originally, I was like, you probably shouldn't ask Farron because he's pretty like, it makes him nervous to talk in front of people. But hey, if you can get him to talk, I think that'd be so great because people love him and he talks through his music, right? I mean, like that's how he shares his heart, especially in these postludes that are kind of little, again, Easter eggs.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think if you can get him to share like his favorite Christmas traditions, that'd be so great.
I thought it'd be really fun, it's just a cool way to learn more about everybody, right? Like because Christmas, I do think is such a staple for even us who we are as a people, as a culture. And so this is just a really great opportunity to hear what those fun things are for people. And then, it's just lighthearted, and it's a little joy in the midst of some darkness here. So, so join us usually we start about 10:25 on the sit down. And so I'll be interviewing just kind of random people on our staff, or maybe who knows what it's going to be. I'm not even sure this week who we're going to have yet, but, we'll at least one person other than myself. And we'll just chat through some of our favorite traditions. And that to me is fun too, right? Because just hearing what other people do is good for me to expand my repertoire of traditions for Christmas too, so that it doesn't get stale. And honestly, it reminded me, just having that conversation with Dexter reminded me and got me really excited about like, oh, I need to get all the stuff to make shortbread again, and get ready to do that. And kind of the same way that Advent snuck up, like, oh, here we are, tomorrow's December. Like we're here, it's happening.
And I think that's okay, right? I mean, Advent as a word means like the preparation time. So it's okay if we're not ready. That's the point of setting aside these, 24 to 27 days, depending on when Thanksgiving falls, of needing to prepare. I mean, that's one of the reasons I don't jump right in on Advent 1 singing Joy to the World and Silent Night, right? We need to take some time. We need to, it's a shock to the system to go from like full on, fall, school, work, projects, midterms. If you're in college, you have exams already because they're not going to send you back until January. So I think it's really necessary that we take some time to be a little, unsure and clumsy and find our way through the darkness.
There it is.
Yeah. Oh, Eli says, speaking of Christmas traditions, Rebecca, do you have any recommendations for Advent songs we could sing with the kiddos while we light the Advent candle? There are a couple. I don't have my, hold on. Y'all talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to go grab my hymnal real quick.
Awesome. Mitchell, let's turn. Let's look at your sermon a little bit and talk through, one of the things you talked about was that, this idea of darkness and the Magi, and at night, if there wasn't the nighttime, they wouldn't have been able to follow the star. So like, I'd love to hear like what your preparation was in the midst of all of this to get ready for Advent 1 this week.
I mean, I'm sure they were far more skilled at astronomy than I am, but I think that
well, one would hope, right?
One would hope, right? But I think that there is there's something very grounding about being set in a specific location while you are trying to stargaze. And when you move, if you move long distances, right? The night sky shifts on you. It doesn't remain static. So
Right.
depending on where you are in relationship to the night sky, you see different things, and you have a different experience of the rising of the sun or the setting of the sun, the rising of the moon, or so this idea that magi would travel and try to also read the celestial sky is interesting to me. Of course, stars have been really good at allowing people to travel in darkness, right? I mean, for hundreds and hundreds of years, the night sky was a point of reference and far more reliable than really anything else. And so I think the balance of that is important. It's disorienting to move, and also comforting to move and have something stable above you. And so
Sure.
I think the challenge is, recognizing that their journey was not just, hey, we're gonna, Uber on over to Herod and Bethlehem, and like we're here. It's a far more complicated thing, and considering all the stuff they would have had to bring with them, not only their own gear, but also obviously what they give Jesus, Jesus' family upon his birth, right? So the thinking is that we need to be reminded that journey is a complicated one, and a difficult one, not one that's easy. You have to be really conscious of setting out on that journey. And I think when we do that, we recognize that that our own journey is far more complicated and weighty than just like waking up on Christmas morning. And I think Advent really is the season where we try to, like Rebecca said, clumsily move towards Bethlehem, and we get more comfortable in the dark. We can see better, right? Our eyes can adjust, and we can be more confident where we're putting our feet and where we're stepping. But these first few days, or maybe even first few weeks of Advent, we're going to be a little disoriented to what's happening because culturally we're actually doing something very different than, like, right, we're actually having to peel back and kind of resist the cultural Christmas so that we can actually have an experience of joy, right, which gets into the distinction between joy and happiness, right?
Yeah, I thought that was really meaningful, Mitchell, when you went into the differences between joy and happiness.
Because culturally, happiness is something that can be bought. It can be it's for sale. It is something that is rather fleeting, and so like a drug, we need more and more stuff, more and more experiences, more and more affirmation, whatever, to feel happy. It is highly contextual, and joy is something radically different. And I think culturally, Christmas is the selling of happiness, right? That's why everyone's disappointed, right? When it's not snowing on Christmas, or right,
Sure.
we didn't get that thing that we wanted for Christmas, or right. Joy is completely different. It is a recognition, I think, of something that is unmovable in the midst of a moving and chaotic world. It is grounding. It is it's a wide range of emotions. It's not just happiness. I think that's really important to recognize. I'll end with the quote from those two Canadian anarchists, right? Joy is the ability to feel really, really broadly and really, really deeply at the same time. That is something that allows us to be alive, more alive, right? Joy is essentially, for me, at least in this series, joy is best defined as the experience of being both human and connected to the divine in such a way that we are more alive and we are more aware. And I think like that is a really important thing, and something that can stabilize us in the midst of a shifting night sky or shifting world.
Yeah, I think that's important because as we've dealt with throughout this pandemic, so many folks in our community and beyond, I would say worldwide, have been dealing with increased anxiety and depression. And I would say the distinction between joy and happiness feeds into that as well, because we feel like, I mean, that's very telling that I said that phrase. it's either that we feel happy or we feel depressed. And I think the concept of joy and trying to live into also the fact that God has joy in us, right? In Zephaniah 3, it says, God rejoices over us with singing. That's where the word rejoice comes from, is like this concept of we are not responsible for keeping ourselves happy and joyful at all times. God is with us in it, which is the whole point of Advent, right? Emmanuel, God with us.
Right.
Yeah. But yes,
Actually,
so
can I say a quote real fast on that?
Yeah.
I saw a Thich Nhat Hanh quote the other day that said, "There is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way." And I think that like once we come to that recognition of happiness, that's whenever we experience the joy then, right? Like it's not like that we're continually finding and seeking new happiness and happiness here. Like once we recognize like happiness is the way, like that to me is whenever we experience the concept of joy.
Yeah, I remember that I was in Alaska and I was like not having an existential crisis, but I was like really unsettled, and I was talking to a friend, and she said, like, I'm like, I just wonder like when I'll get to the place I need to be, right? Like when will I get there? And she read me a quote that essentially was like, there is no place you need to be, like the journey itself is the place. And I think that is an understanding of joy that allows us to like have peaks and valleys, because we recognize that is what it means to be human.
Right.
And like if our life is centered or rest in the gospel, then like we can not withstand everything that comes at us, but we can fully experience it all, so that then we can be fully present for not only ourselves and for a work God's called us to, but also for others. And so that's kind of the joy that I'm after, is it's that recognition of who we are in relationship to God's in breaking into the world.
Yeah.
And what that means for us as we live in very unsettled times.
So that leads, and Neil, I haven't forgotten your question. I have my hymnal right here. That leads, though, into what our offertory was, which is our choir singing, I Believe. There are a lot of different settings of this text, and one of my favorites is by Mark Miller, but there are others that are gorgeous. But the text is, I believe in the sun, even when it's not shining. I believe in love, even when I don't feel it. I believe in God, even when God is silent. And the story behind that is, which, it's a story, it's a myth in the best possible sense of the word. So from what we know, whether that's fact or truth or some of both, is that these 3 lines were found scratched on a wall of a concentration camp during the Holocaust. And it's thought that it was like written by a young person that was in this concentration camp, which just, I think, to me, encapsulates so much of what, it's very difficult for me to either conduct or sing that anthem without bursting into tears, because it is so very powerful. And our choir has come to love that deeply, because the way it builds, right? It starts with a single voice. And Sarah was just gorgeous in that solo.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And then we add a few more voices. We add the sopranos. Then we add a few more. We add the altos. Then we add a few more. We add the baritones. And then it crescendos and crescendos, gets louder and louder until we are singing full voice. I believe in love, even when I don't feel it. And what a powerful countercultural assertion that is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I just think that story, the background of the text, makes it even more important. But yeah, that's what Advent is to me. And that's what, the search for mental health is to me. That's what the search for God is. So much of that.
Yeah. And it's the bedrock of faith, right? Like it's easy, I think, to believe in God when things feel right.
Sure.
And the challenge always is like faith-wise, like how do we put our faith into the gospel of Jesus Christ when we don't feel it at all? And then how do we trust that others are going to kind of carry the weight for us when we don't? And the whole love piece is really interesting. Like, how do we believe in love when we don't feel it? Love is such one of those words that I talked about is so fleeting at times, and it requires a redefining of so much of how we live and how we invite others to live. And the search for happiness, like, I think is the fool's errand, and there's something deeper. So hopefully we can explore it more, over the next few weeks.
Yeah.
That way, when we get to Christmas morning, regardless of, right, you feel like it is not going to be the same, and it's probably going to suck. But that doesn't mean that, like,
Scrooge,
right. But it doesn't mean we can't be joyful, right? Like, even if it's not what we want it to be, that doesn't mean that we can't still wake up and have the joy of Christmas morning, of what it means for God to choose to be in relationship with creation in a very powerful, unique way.
And that it's not just one day. I mean, to me, that's important on a lot of levels. Just as a person, I tend to stress out about big holidays, and it's important for me to remember, and Jeff helps me do this, is like, if Thanksgiving Day isn't perfect, that's okay, right? I mean, there are all the days around it that we get to be thankful and we get to celebrate family. If Christmas Day isn't perfect, that's okay. Leave your tree up an extra week. And well, that's true. Talk about culture. Everybody overdoses on Christmas, so we're not even like willing to let Christmas last the full 12 days. But yes, so Advent songs to sing. There is a wonderful song, and actually today I'm hoping to restart my, if not daily, at least maybe a few times a week, hashtag heart songs that I was doing earlier in the pandemic. And so one of them that I can start with today is called Advent Song. And it's actually meant to be sung one verse a week as you light the Advent candle.
That's cool.
So the refrain, which would be really easy to teach your kiddos or sing as a family, no matter what age you are, says, "Candle, candle, burning bright, shining in the cold winter night. Candle, candle, burning bright, fill our hearts with Christmas light." So that's a little refrain.
What was it called?
It's called Advent Song.
Okay.
And we can link to this. It's by Mary Lou Walker. But then it has a verse for each week. So it says, light the Advent candle 1, and then light the Advent candle 2, 3, 4, and then it has a verse for Christmas Eve. So that would be a really cool thing to read the text of the verse and then maybe just sing the refrain together as you light it. And if you got an Advent box, this is what your Advent wreath can be looking like now, with just one candle there. So I think that's a really good way to incorporate maybe a new tradition. Maybe you haven't
for sure
been home. Maybe you've been working a lot, and now that you're working from home, you can build some new traditions this Advent.
Totally. Well, friends, it's a lot, and I like people engaging. Hey, thanks for commenting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is great.
It's great. And we'll keep putting it out on Facebook. We kind of stumbled upon that a few weeks ago, and it's been really good. So for everyone who tuned in, thank you. If you haven't subscribed to our podcast channel, you should do it.
Wherever you listen to podcasts,
wherever you get your podcast.
Search for White Rock UMC.
Join us next Monday for the Sunday Sit Down as we talk about Advent too.
Wait, did you say next Monday for the Sunday Sit Down?
Monday for day after Sunday.
Day after Sunday.
There we go. Yeah. Or Sunday for the Sunday Sit Down.
Or Sunday for the Sunday Sit Down. Or you could listen to Sunday Sit Down on Monday. I don't,
whatever you want to do.
Whatever you want to do. However you want to chop it up.
And we just want to say that we are all woke pagans from the East. Mitchell, that was the weirdest phrase I've ever heard you use in a sermon, and I kind of
really? That's saying something.
Okay, maybe top 5 weird. Maybe
modern magi.
Modern magi, woke pagans from the East, and Canadian anarchists.
Such a strange day. Okay, well, great job, everybody.
Go back and listen to the sermon. Bye, friends.
Bye.
You're listening to a podcast recorded at White Rock United Methodist Church in the heart of East Dallas. For more information, you can find us at wrumc.org. And make sure you stay subscribed to this channel to stay up to date with all of our content.